Every time I get hit with a flood of reports claiming that something terrible has happened, I immediately get this feeling, especially when there are a lot of them and they're coming from different directions and, so to speak, from sources that supposedly don't overlap. I start to feel deep down that I'm being fooled, or at least they're trying to fool me. That's the memorandum. Let's talk about this very memorandum between the US and Iran, which in the last 2 days has become, in my opinion, the most talked about document that nobody actually knows. That is, nobody knows what's in it, at least nobody did, right? But everyone was discussing it and everyone was condemning it. Now it's been released. Well, not officially released yet, but it's already been read out by the White House representative, by a journalist. So you could say we know about 95% of it. We know what's in there, unless, of course, there are some changes before the 19th. But nevertheless, let's go through this document, which is remarkable for the fact that there's nothing remarkable in it. All right, the US and Iran memorandum. What's not there is more important than what is there. The whole world is just discussing the deal between the US and Iran, but almost no one noticed the main thing. The document they're about to sign in Switzerland. The document doesn't obligate Israel to anything at all. Why half of Israel is shouting about this, I don't understand. But it's like the Budapest Memorandum, which nobody read, but everyone discussed for 20 years. And it would have been easier if you just went to your computer, typed in Budapest Memorandum, and it pops up in any language. No, nobody reads it, but everyone discusses and condemns it. And they also say you are obliged to protect us under the Budapest Memorandum. But have you read it? No, but I know. All right, fine. So the document that is about to be signed in Switzerland does not obligate Israel to anything at all. Let's try to go through the document line by line and see who in this story actually got freedom of action and who got obligations. An important note right away, because I promised you not to mix up facts with versions. What we're analyzing is a document that hasn't been signed yet and hasn't been published by the White House. There is still no official text. There is a transcript that was read to journalists on the evening of June 17 by a representative of the Trump administration, and there is an earlier version that was leaked to Arabic language media before. So CNN wrote just recently that the wording in these two versions is different. Also, how to interpret this, I don't know. But we'll take as a basis what we got from the White House with the journalist, okay? So to sum up, well, I have a hypothesis, just a hypothesis, not a fact. Before this text was read out, there were already other versions of the document circulating online, favoring those who wanted to present the deal as Washington's capitulation to Tehran. I'm sure that in Arabic it's Tehran's capitulation to Washington, so on both sides they're trying. Perhaps the administration released its own version precisely to counter these toxic interpretations with its own, so to speak, more accurate one. What's important? The text that was read out today is the most authoritative of all those available in the public domain, right? Although it is not yet a signed document, the signing will take place on July 19th in Switzerland. So, having said all that, now we can start, as they say, to look into this matter. So, the agreement to end the war between the US and Iran could in practice turn into a continuation of the same war for a third party. Because Israel is not signing this document, so formally it is not obligated to anything. Israel is not a party to the memorandum, ladies and gentlemen. The US and Iran are making agreements between themselves and for themselves. That means there's nothing in this text that forbids Israel from continuing operations against Hamas, against Hezbollah, or against any structure financed by Iran. And what's especially important, I looked carefully and didn't find a single line that would forbid the US from helping Israel. With weapons, intelligence, diplomatic support, this document doesn't address that at all. Why did I talk so much about Israel? Because that's where so much moaning, shouting, and hatred came from. I don't know. Anything could be going on there. I just decided that all the Ukrainians who used to write nasty things about Trump moved to Israel, settled there, and now they're writing nasty things from there. The same logic works in the opposite direction as well, just so it's clear. Those whom we call Iran's allies or proxies. There you have Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Shia militias in Iraq, and the Memorandum. They don't sign it either. They're not there. They're not mentioned there. Iran can promise anything on behalf of anyone, but it's impossible to legally bind those who didn't sign. It turns out to be a neat arrangement. The document only binds those who signed it. And there are 3 or 4 times more warning parties in the region than there are signatories. Next. One amusing point: sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon. At first glance, it seems neutral, boring, diplomatic. Like, we guarantee, we don't guarantee. We agree that Lebanon should have sovereignty and territorial integrity. Okay, very good. But if you think about it, that's exactly what Israel wants. Lebanon, as a state, without a foreign army on its territory, without Hezbollah, as parallel military forces, without Iranian weapons in the south of the country. But Iran and Hezbollah signing on to the same wording, that is signing, and Iran interprets it, Hezbollah too. Yes, they clearly put some other meaning into it. Hezbollah as part of Lebanese society. And the state not as an occupying force that needs to be removed from there. It turns out that the parties to the conflict are signing up for the same status, but in words they understand it in completely opposite ways. I will be extremely interested to see how Tehran publicly explains this point to its audience in the coming days. Explaining it without either side losing face won't be easy. And I think they did it on purpose. They wrote it this way so that it could be explained in different ways. The deadline for the final agreement is 60 days, with the possibility of extension by mutual consent of the parties. What? In practice, this means it has always meant that, right? But there's no actual deadline. They just threw out 60 days just to placate people. Why? Oh, to calm people down, right? There's only the desire of both sides to buy time. And right now, for example, it's Trump who needs time. Maybe the Iranians too. There aren't that many months left until the midterm congressional elections in November 2026. And a prolonged open conflict in the Middle East doesn't help electorally. For the party in power. Maybe Iran thinks that in these 60, 80, 90, 120 days, they'll still have time to finish developing the atomic bomb. And then, as they say, they'll be on top, so time is important for them too. Maybe, right? But, so to speak, we'll try to keep an eye on this and check it from every angle so that it doesn't happen. Now, pay attention to the wording about troop withdrawal. Not right away. So, the Americans are withdrawing their troops, yes, theoretically, yes, but in practice only 30 days after signing the final agreement. And do you see this final agreement? I don't see it yet. In 60 days, they'll extend it for another 60 days, then another 60 days, and then maybe they'll sign the final agreement. All this time, American troops, the Navy, and so on, in whatever numbers we decide are necessary, will be there. So all of this can be postponed indefinitely by mutual agreement. And what does mutual agreement mean? I want to cancel, but we don't want to cancel. That's it. Nothing is clear about mutual agreement, right? So, in fact, the U.S. and its allies are maintaining their presence in the region for an indefinite period. Exactly as long as the negotiations are still ongoing. As long as the negotiations are ongoing. This is not a violation of the document. That's just how it's written. Once again, I seriously suspect that both sides deliberately wrote it in a way to confuse their own people. If it's important for you to analyze such documents line by line and not just by headlines and news feeds, subscribe to the channel Roadmap to Freedom. And for those who want to go even deeper, there are paid tiers, including a paid tier for $4 a month with document analyses you won't find anywhere else. Now, the point that I consider the most interesting, the most important one, so to speak, we've already covered it, but it's the most interesting point. This is then a fund of $300 billion. For what? for the reconstruction and development of Iran. That's right. Let's read the wording carefully. Nowhere does it say that the U.S. or the Gulf countries are required to transfer this money to Ukraine, to someone, somewhere. This is not reparations, not an indemnity, not a gift to the losing side. So what is it? According to the letter of the text, this is an investment mechanism. They invest there on terms that still need to be agreed upon, and only if those terms are favorable to the investor. It doesn't even say that this is government money. The wording allows for a mixed fund, where both public and private capital from all over the world can come in. Well, that's roughly what we were proposing to do in Ukraine. This changes the very nature of the relationship with Iran. The nature of the relationship with Iran, I'm trying to explain right now. Previously, decisions inside the country were made only by, well, let's say we say Iranians, but in reality it's the leadership. What was happening with the economy was their internal affair. Basically, so to speak, they have this kind of shadow economy, which is practically run by the core. And there's a whole empire, so to speak, and in the empire, the core also runs things. That is, well, they built several such levels in order to keep power in their own hands on the one hand, and on the other hand, so they could steal and do it calmly. Now, capital, big capital, 300 billion gets a voice in how the Iranian economy is structured. For trade, for joint production, for the world to interact with Iran, this is a huge advantage. But what if the Israelis want to invest there? Someone will say no. What do they have to do with it? Does it say anywhere that they do? For those inside the Iranian regime who wanted complete autonomy from the outside world, that very fact is a drawback. It depends on which side you're looking at it from. But as a mechanism for opening up a closed economy, this is one of the most constructive points of this memorandum. This is one of the most effective ways to reshape and restructure the economy. You understand that this is a huge hammer which is absolutely in the hands of investors. Nowhere is it written that this is transferred to Iran even for a second. If Iran starts acting up, Iran has plenty of tankers. As soon as they arrest something, their tankers are immediately arrested there. Iran confirms that it will never produce nuclear weapons. Wonderful. The question is how this will be verified. The text doesn't address this at all, not in any way. Apparently, the control mechanism is something that should be agreed upon during those same 60 plus 60 days. And what will happen if Iran breaks its promises? There's nothing written about that either. This is the biggest loophole in the entire memorandum, and this is exactly where the main dispute will unfold in the next 2 months. And now something that affects all of us personally, ladies and gentlemen. Who has ever left the Soviet Union or Russia? The point about unfreezing Iranian assets. Why does this concern us? Look closely at the logic. At some point, the government decided that other people's money isn't exactly other people's money. Familiar feeling, right? Many of us grew up in a system where a citizen's property rights were conditional. It depended on what the state decided today. If they decided to take it away, they would. If they decided, as they say, to pardon or do something else, they would. I can execute, I can pardon, right? It's the same logic here, only in reverse. If Iran's money is blocked, ideally it should have gone through an international court. The U.S. proves the damage. Iran, so to speak, either really did something, is found liable and pays, or it proves that there was no damage, and then the freeze is lifted. There's nothing about this in the text of the memorandum at all. Zero. The assets are simply unfrozen during the negotiations. So it's frozen without a court decision, and it's unfrozen without a court decision. Without an admission of guilt, without any explanation. On what grounds was this money frozen in the first place? Because Iran was doing something we didn't like, right? And now the U.S. will do something that Iran won't like? No. And here comes an unpleasant reciprocal possibility. If money can be frozen without a court order just because someone didn't like something, what's the guarantee that Iran won't apply the same logic to those same 300 billion in investments? When they arrive, they'll say, "We don't like what you're doing. We didn't like it. You're not flying to the moon well enough." And they won't give it back. They'll take the money. Of course, no one is going to fight for that money. It's not territory or sovereignty. But now they'll start, either by court decision or maybe not even by decision, just stopping their ships with their oil, like I already said, right? So actually, it's the weak side. That's why you have to be strong, or you have to be allied with the strong. The weak side always or almost always gives in to the strong one. Even if we set aside the legal question of who originally owned the frozen assets, the money goes into the fund gradually in any case, without a clear schedule. That is, they gave $1 billion and now we watch what happens. Everyone who reads the headline about $300 billion for Iran, supposedly gifted to them by America, should keep this in mind. America isn't giving anything, and it's not $300 billion. If you want to get these document breakdowns, analyses of documents the day after the news comes out and not a week later retold by agencies, download the free book from the link below the video. This gives you access to daily 10-minute videos sent directly to your email. And now let's put it all together. This is what the balance of this deal looks like if you read the document line by line, not just by the headlines. The U.S. gives nothing away. The U.S. does not lose the military strength of its allies or the right to help Israel, according to the text of the documents. Iran renounces nuclear weapons, formally, but always, on paper. But they always refused nuclear weapons, and they said, "We're not going to produce them. But why did you enrich it not to 4 but to 60? Oh, by accident. Ha, how did that happen by accident? Israel gets completely free rein. No obligation to stop operations against Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iranian infrastructure in the region. Zero. Nothing. Iran and the countries of the region are starting joint investment activity. Work, specifically. Not charity. They agree on investment protection, on the terms, on where the money will go. This is a commercial arrangement. It's not just, here's money. Do whatever you want, even buy weapons if you want. And most importantly, there's no protection for terrorist organizations there. There's simply nothing like that in this document. Neither Hezbollah nor the Houthis nor the Shiite groups in Iraq are protected. They're not protected by this text. Not one line. I found nothing after checking all 14 points. That's exactly why I'm looking at this document, even in its current unsigned form, with cautious optimism. Not because it's perfect, it's full of holes, like a net for catching, I don't know, dolphins. And there are a lot of holes in it, including when it comes to controlling the nuclear program, and in the fate of the assets. But the basic architecture of the deal is not built on capitulation. In any country, but on keeping things separate. The military issue is separate, the economy is separate, and each country retains its right to defend itself. This is not a perfect world, but it's a working model in which freedom of action is not canceled by paperwork, and that's exactly it. That's exactly what our channel is dedicated to. Ladies and gentlemen, see you. We'll definitely see you again in the next video. But for now, if you want, as they say, you can take a look yourself. Now you can look at these 14 points with fresh eyes, and you can virtually spit in the face of anyone who says something about someone betraying someone else. And that's it. The end. Maybe it's the end, or maybe it's the beginning, or maybe it's the middle. Who knows? Goodbye. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we say goodbye.